Complete this rhyme. Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
How are you working? How?
Who is that?
Welcome to The Point of View.
Welcome to Face to Face on Channel 1 Television.
And hello, welcome to What the Papers Are Saying.
This be football made in Ghana. It be the only pidgin show where it day on your screen. Channel 1 TV.
Thank you so much.
Some people are late. You know, they have to catch up. City TV is now Channel 1 TV. You understand?
This is Channel 1 TV, telling your story, empowering change.
Complete this rhyme. Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
How are you working? How?
Who is that?
Welcome to The Point of View.
Welcome to Face to Face on Channel 1 Television.
And hello, welcome to What the Papers Are Saying.
This be football made in Ghana. It be the only pidgin show where it day on your screen. Channel 1 TV.
Thank you so much.
Some people are late. You know, they have to catch up. City TV is now Channel 1 TV. You understand?
This is Channel 1 TV, telling your story, empowering change.
Complete this rhyme. Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
How are you working? How?
Who is that?
Welcome to The Point of View.
Welcome to Face to Face on Channel 1 Television.
And hello, welcome to What the Papers Are Saying.
This be football made in Ghana. It be the only pidgin show where it day on your screen. Channel 1 TV.
Thank you so much.
Some people are late. You know, they have to catch up. City TV is now Channel 1 TV. You understand?
This is Channel 1 TV, telling your story, empowering change.
Complete this rhyme. Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
How are you working how?
Who's that? Welcome to The Point of View.
Welcome to Face to Face on Channel 1 Television.
And hello, welcome to what the papers are saying.
This be football made in Ghana. It be the only pidgin show where it day on your screen. Channel 1 TV.
Thank you so much.
Some people are late. You know, they have to catch up. City TV is now Channel 1 TV. You understand?
This is Channel 1 TV.
Hello there. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Channel 1 Television. We're broadcasting live from our studios at number 5 Ola Hansen Lane at Tesano here in Accra. Now, with just a little over 30 days to the general elections, it is obvious that the various political actors, the political parties and their flag bearers, including the independent candidates, will be engaging all communities, promising solutions to the various challenges within the country. IMANI Ghana has over the years committed to interrogating these political party manifestos. This morning, they're doing a critical analysis of some of the political party manifestos. And we're here to bring you a live coverage of that event. Let's take you to the Tang Palace Hotel here in Accra, where the IMANI analysis of the manifesto for the 2024 general elections is underway.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our friends from the media, good morning to you and welcome to Tang Palace Hotel here in Accra. My name is Caleb Kuda. I work with 97.3 City FM and Channel 1 Television, where this year's Manifesto 2024 is beaming live to the rest of the world. So let me say another good morning to everyone once again. Good morning, everybody. Oh, I didn't get that response. Good morning. I love the energy. Thank you so much and welcome to Manifesto 2024. We're bringing you this with the kind support of the British High Commission's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and all our development partners and agencies. Now, 2024 has been described as the election year. We have more than 60 countries going to the polls. As we speak, America is going to the polls. Ghana will be doing the same. Algeria, Russia, India, a good number of countries are doing that. Now, for close to 2 decades, we have a particular civil society organization here in Ghana that has dedicated itself to critically and thoroughly analyzing the manifestos of the key political political parties and informing the public which of the policies are feasible, which others are not too feasible in their analysis. And 2024 will not be very different. That's why we are coming your way with a Manifesto 2024 today. So our program is very simple today. We'll take a very brief opening remarks from our founding president and CEO of IMANI Africa. When he's done, we'll jump into our report presentation. First will be done by Dennis Asare. He's a senior research associate with IMANI. When he's done, Amprofi Ajiman, another senior research assistant associate with IMANI, will bring us another presentation. Then we'll take questions and answers. So it's a very packed day, but looks very, very productive. So please put your hands together and welcome yourselves. It's good to have you. And on that note, I present to you the founding president and CEO of IMANI, Mr. Franklin Cudjoe. Let's welcome him.
Thank you very much, Caleb. You are far too kind. Good morning, everyone. Let me just say that 16 years ago, when we began this inquiry into the feasibility or otherwise of manifestos, we were confronted with the question, and indeed whether we should ask politicians what are their business plans. You'd have thought that business plans were only meant for corporations. But we're also well aware that there are certain principles in life that I think guided our thinking at the time. And I'll just share two of them with you. Those two actually are not original with me. They are original with a friend of mine called Lawrence Reed. And I think the first one essentially is nobody spends somebody else's money as carefully as he will spend his own, right? We know that. And secondly, government has nothing to give you. In fact, government has nothing to give anybody except what it first takes from somebody. And a government that is big enough to take away, to give you everything you want, is big enough to take away everything you've got. This morning, you are going to listen to some of the things that you wish for yourselves, the needs and the wants, and then you see how it will impact your pocket. And with that, I'd like to say that we are grateful to the British High Commission for supporting this particular project, and we are grateful to Channel 1 TV that has graciously decided to take this pro bono. Thank you very much. Enjoy the program.
Thank you very much, Franklin. And so, on that note, we jump straight into the conversation. You're watching us live on Channel 1 Television. We are coming to you from Tang Palace Hotel. This is a Manifesto 2024 brought to you by the kind support of the British High Commission, of course, the Center for Policy and Education. I'm talking about IMANI. So, we're ready to take our very first presentation. Are we upgrading? Is it a reset? And then we have the Afafranto also. Afafranto made it to a Manifesto 2024. I was wondering why I didn't see the 12 apostles. But we'll be getting into that shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's put our hands together and welcome Dennis Asare, Senior Research Associate, as he takes off. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for making time to join us today. It's a very interesting time of our country because we are at a crossroad and our development issues are getting more serious and difficult. And so in such situation, it is very important for us to reflect on what the leaders of our country are proposing for us. And so we are very happy that you are able to join us this morning at this year's critical analysis under our Manifesto project. So to start, I think Mr. Franklin Cudjoe has laid a very good foundation about why we do this. And so I wouldn't belabor the point. And so in the presentation, I'll go through a brief context of where we are and give you an idea of where we stand as a country, the future that is facing us, or the glaring future of our development, and the kinds of manifestos that are important to addressing these issues. Then the purpose for or the scope of this project. Then I'll do a brief walk through the methodology that we use to do this. Then one interesting news that will come out of that is that we also try to gauge the level of vagueness of the manifesto promises. So I'll explain that methodology as well. Then we jump into the thematic analysis, then the key issues and the way forward. So by way of context, as I mentioned, we are at a very critical point of our development. People are experiencing the worst form of poverty. As at now, over 40% of our population are multidimensionally poor. There's widespread public sector corruption everywhere you find yourself. In fact, if you look at all the global governance indicators across the world, our performance has been declining over the last 7 to 8 years. If you look at the Corruption Perception Index alone, our performance has dipped so low that it's now even below the 2012 levels. If you look at the World Economic Freedom Index, what you see is that in terms of the level of economic freedom in the country, our performance is also declining in there. What is even surprising is if you look at the World Bank's worldwide governance indicators that look at government effectiveness, regulatory control, and control of corruption, our performance has not changed. And so you find it in the first assessment the IMF did when we approached them. They said that even though government effectiveness in Ghana looks better than its peers, but because of weak control of corruption and regulatory ineffectiveness, there is widespread corruption, and because of that, public service delivery is low. Against all of this background, what you have is that just last week, the Afrobarometer gives us an idea of what people think about their government. So if all of these global indices are not enough to tell you that the future of our development, we face some severe threats, last week Afrobarometer tells us that people don't even trust their government. And so in such a context, what you would expect is that political party manifestos will reflect on the current situations and propose feasible solutions that addresses that. 2 weeks ago, we were here, and we were able to show that despite over 20 years of public financial management reforms, we are pretending to be implementing reforms to strengthen fiscal accountability, but we are not achieving fiscal accountability. And that fiscal recklessness, as we call it, is almost 4.9 billion Ghana cedis. And this is equivalent to about 2.63% of our GDP. This is how much the inappropriate behavior, or let's say misappropriation, lack of effectiveness on the part of MDAs cost us. If you look at how much we spend on social protection alone, the fiscal recklessness or financial irregularities of MDAs are higher than how much we actually spend on social protection, and that if we are supposed to address the fiscal recklessness in the MDs, it could fund each child under the school feeding program by 6 cedis instead of the 1 cedi 20 pesos that we pay. So this is the glaring picture of where we stand as a country. And so the political party manifestos that you see, as we go through the presentations, I want you to reflect whether they are actually addressing the structural problems that creates that widespread corruption, slow growth, and very high levels of poverty. In fact, the IMF predict that if more reforms are not implemented to support the private sector and also the social protection programs, poverty could worsen by 2025 or 2026. And that is also because inflation is rising and the exchange rate depreciation is depreciating the value of people's income. Against this background, we show you the picture of where we are, and we look at what are the parties proposing. So the overarching aim of what we do is that we want to increase citizens' understanding of political parties' manifesto. Civil society is the only solution to addressing this government recklessness, fiscal recklessness, and the lack of public accountability that we've not been able to achieve. And so we do that at IMANI through several products. One of them is what we call the Manifesto. That's what we are doing now. Last 2 weeks, we did the Fiscal Recklessness Index. But more importantly, what we also want to achieve is that we want to encourage both Ghanaian politicians and electorate to focus on issues-based elections and not emotions or, let's say, ethnic-based elections. But we want citizens to understand what the parties are proposing, what that means for your future in the next 4 years. Once you understand that, you reflect, and when you get to the polls, you're able to make informed decision. And also, we also want to look at the manifestos that the parties are proposing. Are they feasible? If they are feasible, what will be the implication on our cause? Because from our experience doing assessing political parties' manifestos, what we know is that at least 56% of political party manifestos end up in the coordinated program for social and economic development, which means that these promises, if they are not well crafted, they don't represent the real solutions, will definitely find their way into government work program, they will find their way in the budget, and they will be costed. And so that is why we do what we do at IMANI on the critical analysis, where we try to show the feasibility of these promises. And so the scope of the assessment this year, we focus on three main political parties. That is the New Patriotic Party, the National Democratic Congress, and the Movement for Change. And we did this because at the time of starting the analysis, these were the only political parties that had launched an official manifesto document that we could refer to. In the past, we used to use political party statements or presidential candidate statement, but sometimes you may not find their statement in the official document, and so we can't hold them to it, or citizens cannot hold them to it. So this time around, we focus mainly on what you have officially communicated to citizens as your policy proposals. And the analysis focus on the key promises. And so what you will hear today is a summary of the anchor promises, or let's say the key promises within the bigger manifestos that the party launched. And as I already mentioned, we focus mainly on the official manifesto document. Let me say that this analysis does not seek to do impact assessment, where we say that given this promise, this is going to be the impact on our economy or no. But we use existing information to critically analyze its feasibility, and potentially, if there is using secondary information, we can show the implication on certain key sectors of our economy or certain key indicators. We are able to demonstrate that. But let me say that we don't seek to do impact assessment in this assessment. The critical analysis follows a 5-stage methodology. And so the first stage is where we critically review the manifestos. And the manifestos are a huge document. So what we do is that we do a deep dive into the manifesto to understand the various themes, the sections, the key issues within the manifestos. Then we have to group them under certain themes that are relatable or connects to the key sectors or key themes around our governance and our development. And so we have about 5 main themes, which I'll get to shortly. Then what we also try to do is that political party manifestos can be really vague. If you leave politicians, they can give you very lofty ideas. And in fact, 2008, we had someone who said he was going to change this economy through, is it donkey dung, or someone said an almond economy. We've seen a lot of things that people have even proposed for this country. So we try to use simple metrics to gauge the level of vagueness. And so we are able to group them into 3 categories. Some of the manifestos are very quantifiable. You can really see what exactly the party wants to do. Some are semi-quantifiable. Something needs to happen before that thing they are promising will actually occur. Then some are just vague. They are non-quantifiable. You don't specifically see what really the political party or the politician wants to do. After doing all of this, then we look at anchor promises. Which promise has significant implication within that sector or that issue that it is trying to address within that theme? Which ones have real sectoral impact? Or let's say, if it was implemented, which ones would have, let's say, very significant implications either on cost or within the sectors that it was promised? So those ones, we select them. Then we do our desk research and analysis. So these are the main themes that we look at under the critical analysis. So we have economy. So the economy is a theme. And within the economy theme, we have the macroeconomy itself. We have job creation. We have agriculture, trade and industry, private sector development, tourism and sports development. Then we have the energy. And the energy tries to separate, we separate it from broader infrastructure, because under energy we can have power, petroleum, renewable energy, climate change and energy transitions, and energy systems management. Then we come to infrastructure, where we look at fiscal infrastructure and any other thing that can be considered under the infrastructure. And they are mainly, around these sub-themes. Then we have governance. And under governance, you look at local government, chieftaincy, anti-corruption, regulatory reforms, and recently affirmative action, which actually appears strongly within the political parties' manifestos. Then we look at education and social services, which look at education itself, education and health infrastructure, social protection, healthcare, and under healthcare we consider water, sanitation and hygiene and all the other issues. Then gender-based violence issues too, if they appear to be recurring themes within the manifesto. Now the methodology, just some brief definitions and we get into the analysis. So if we say a promise is quantifiable, what we are trying to do is that the promise clearly states how much of a service will be provided. How much of a service, it is very clear how much of a service that party wants to offer, exactly what that party wants to offer. So for example, one of the examples we found in the manifesto is cutting 3% of GDP from government expenditure. It is very clear and specific. And so such a promise, we call it a quantifiable promise, because it's very specific. Now we have the semi-quantifiable promise. Now the promise clearly states that a specific service will be provided together with a variable X. That is, if that variable X should happen, then that promise can be achieved. So for example, it says, establish an office of management and budget with oversight for fiscal policy, budget preparation. So which means that all of those things can be done only if that office for budget and office of management and budget is set up. So such a promise, we call it semi-quantifiable. And so in case we do the ordinal manifesto assessment, which we also do every 4 years, we will go straight to the ministry or the department and find out, has the office of management and budget been set up? One, if they've been set up, it will take. Are they doing these specific actions? So that's what we call that semi-quantifiable. Then we have the non-quantifiable ones. These ones, the promise does not clearly state the specific service the party wants to deliver. So it is very vague. You just can't see what exactly the party really wants to see. And so with these three categories, we are able to gauge the level of vagueness and specificity. And with the context I laid, it is about time that we start demanding accountability, holding political parties to what they say. And before we can hold them to what they say, we must make sure that what they say, they are very specific in what they say. Because if they make vague statements, they can go ahead and do anything and attribute and say that I said I was going to do this. So even if I did 1% of that, even if I did something small about it, it can take as we have done it. And so we want to minimize the extent to which we give political parties very long room to make very huge and overly, or I wouldn't say overly ambitious, but huge promises that you can't see the head and tail. You can't specifically say that this is what they want to do. And those ones are called the non-quantifiable ones. And so we come to the analysis and discussions. So if you take the New Patriotic Party alone, their manifesto promise, if you go deep into it, at least using the methodology that I've explained, we can count about 574 promises. In just that document alone, we can count about 574 promises. This is not surprising, because in 2019, when we did the ordinal assessment, we could count almost about 512 promises. So it is a pattern. Because we do manifestos, we've seen it before. And under that, you see, you also categorize it under the themes. So the lemon green is the non-quantifiable ones. And you see that most of the manifestos are centered around the economy. And that is mainly because of where we are. And as I already mentioned, the economy is a bigger theme that covers the macroeconomy and other things like job creation, agriculture, and others. Then you see that there are more non-quantifiable promises than the ones that we can specifically say no, or the service that they want to provide. So with this, we say that there are more vague promises in that manifesto than there are more quantifiable ones. If you go to the NDC's manifesto, if we can count about 851 promises in the NDC's manifesto, and it follows a pattern. So you can also see that most of the manifestos too are centered around the economy and education and social service. Same as the NPP one too, we see a lot more non-quantifiable promises than the quantifiable and semi-quantifiable ones, which also shows some more vague promises in the political party manifesto, the NDC's manifesto. Now, if you look at Movement for Change too, same pattern, economy being the big one, another pattern, you see a lot more non-quantifiable promises. So what we say is that most of the promises within the manifestos that these three political parties have launched is actually vague. You can't quantify them, or you can't really see the specific service that they want to offer. And so in case any of them is elected, it is very difficult for you to hold them accountable. Secondly, it is very difficult for you to even have an idea of, in terms of it costing and its implementation, how it is going to be done. And so we see a lot more vague promises in the political party manifestos, and which is not good. And the context that Mr. Kujo laid, that it is very important that we pay attention to what political parties are saying, given the peculiar situation we find ourselves in. So we go into the discussions. And so we have already laid some context about where we are, and so I wouldn't belabor it. But what we try to also do when we are undertaking the critical analysis is that we want to focus on, ideally, what should these manifestos be addressing under economy. So if you look at the IMF program that we are currently implementing, some of the 2 key or 3 key issues that the IMF is trying to address is, 1, keep expenditure under control, increase revenue mobilization, address the energy sector under recoveries. Because these are the big problems that we are facing within our Public Financial Management Act, which are also impacting on exchange rate and inflation. And so we expect that if you go into the parties' manifestos, the promises that they are making will directly respond to these issues, and also the things that they promise will align with some of the targets that we've set for ourselves within the IMF document. And so this picture actually tells it all about where we are. So what you see on my left here is that you see our growth is just declining, even though we've made some good progress under the IMF program, but still the vulnerabilities are still huge. And you see that inflation too rose very high. Now, even though it has declined to about 21%, it is still extremely high if you compare it to some of our peers. One other challenge is the exchange rate. In fact, between 2023 and now, the exchange rate has always depreciated above 20%. Over a year to year, you can see that it's always very high. And in the recent Africa Economic Outlook by the World Bank, what they are actually proposing is that monetary policy rates will have to stay at its current level or move up, so that countries like Ghana can keep their inflation in check. Which means that we are not out of the woods yet. Because inflation is still high, we need to keep monetary policy rate where it is. And if monetary policy rate is high, which means that the gross reference rate the banks use to set the commercial lending rate will also be high, which means the cost of doing business will be higher for businesses. And compounding that will be the plethora of taxes that these businesses have to face. And that is why it is important we pay attention to what the politicians are saying. Another thing is that because of these challenges, you see it mimicked within all the key sectors of our economy. None of them seems to really be doing well, even though some are showing some minimal progress. But if you look at industry, which in every economy is seen as the biggest employer or the main driver of growth, industry has been struggling to grow even after COVID. And so we need a lot more robust and supportive business environment to actually support industry to do well. So now let's get into the party's manifestos proper. So if you take the NPP, these are some of the anchor promises that we picked from the NPP's manifesto. One of the key things that NPP wants to do on the economy is that they want to cut 3% of GDP from government expenditure. That's estimated around 30 billion. And if you look at our public expenditure, it is between compensation, debt servicing, goods and services, and capital expenditure. For the first two, had it not been that we stopped paying our external debt, for the first two, you can't do much about it. But the areas that we can do something about is the capital expenditure and goods and services. And if you look at capital expenditure as a share of GDP, has always been hovering between 2.5 and 3% of GDP. In fact, in the current IMF projections, they expect that capital expenditure will drop to about 2.2%, then goods and services will come to around 1%. So if you put these two together, you get about 3%. And so that 3% estimation that they make, even if even though they didn't share the basis for the 3%, but if you look at our spending patterns, these two, capital expenditure and goods and services, appear to be about 3% of GDP. And so this 30 billion, what they intend to do is that government will not be using public funds to actually pay for public infrastructure and certain services by MDEs, but the private sector will not come and take that cost. So the idea is that government will invite private sector to now invest 30 billion in our public expenditure. And so we need to understand, will the private sector pay? Or would the private sector be available to do that? And if they are available, how do we ensure that the systems we put in place address contract overpricing, address the ills in public procurement, and we don't create a situation where we end up spending more than what you said we are going to give it to the private sector? What we see is that in terms of capital expenditure financing, we have always sourced it from outside, year on year, over the last decade. In fact, from 2017 to 2023, public expenditure on only capital expenditure, the percentage of foreign finance capital expenditure is always above 50%, which means that most of our capital expenditure is financed through foreign sources, and that domestically we are unable to finance capital expenditure. Similarly, we get some domestic money to finance goods and services. But if you look at the share of private sector participation in capital expenditure or infrastructure in Africa, it's actually declining. And now the African Development Bank estimates that there is going to be an infrastructure financing deficit of over $100 billion every year in Africa. And so if you look at the current trends, you see a lot more governments taking up the role of financing their public infrastructure. But here is our case. We don't have enough money. Over the years, we've been financing our capital expenditure through foreign sources. And so given that particular context, it means that we have to be very, very good in terms of preparing more bankable projects in attracting this foreign financing. But putting all of that aside, assuming domestically the private sector is willing to finance this, the government would have to implement very smart metering and cost monitoring systems so that we are able to ensure that if a ministry is getting service, for example, printing service from a private sector, there's accurate monitoring of the costs so that there's not contract overpricing. When IMANI did public procurement analysis, what we are able to identify is that if you take all the big ticket or highly financial value contracts, they are always or at all times procured through single sourcing, which means that single sourcing is one of the popular ways that governments procure high financial value contracts. And so it is given that we still have challenges in our procurement system in terms of accountability, we need to make sure that we create a more robust, independent, and transparent procurement system to ensure that we address contract overpricing and things like the political clientelism that has bedeviled our public procurement sphere. And so while this promise looks feasible, there are challenges in terms of the availability of private sector capital to actually do this. Then the second thing is the challenges within our public procurement system make it more complex and even difficult, and that we will need a lot more smart monitoring if we want to effectively achieve this, even though it looks doable, but we need to monitor so that we guard against the overpricing. Another thing is that they want to provide a fiscal rule that the budgeted expenditure in any year does not exceed 105% of the previous year's expenditure. What this means is that they want to go back to the fiscal rule we set up in the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which this government suspended, and we never went back to that rule. So in their current manifesto, they are proposing to go back to the fiscal rules. But the challenge is that the exit clauses are very loose. So the minister can suspend it at any time. And there's not a particular specific timeline that says that if you suspend the fiscal rule, you must come back quickly within this time period. And so if this can be achievable and ensure that it is stable over 4 years, then the exit clauses within the FRA must be tightened so that we hold the minister to it and we reduce the extent of discretion. Another challenge is that in terms of enforcing these things, because politicians largely would like to spend to respond to the needs of citizens or the needs of their voters, you are likely to see that the least in situation where government expenditure would have to go up, the minister may suspend this rule. And that is why they are also saying that they want to also promote, provide a legal backing for the Fiscal Advisory Council. The Fiscal Advisory Council that was set up did not have a place in the FRA law. So they said that they are going to set it up. But we are not only interested in setting up the Fiscal Council. When we looked at fiscal councils across the globe, as at now, if you look at the IMF Fiscal Council database, one of the key things that they are ensuring is that fiscal councils are independent. And in terms of independence, how they are funded, access to information, in terms of how they engage the media, how they report, and also their ability to pull the brakes on government. Globally, most governments are not allowing fiscal councils to actually pull the brakes on them. But given our history of fiscal recklessness, if we really want this fiscal council to work, then the fiscal council we set up must be independent in terms of how it is set up. In fact, IMANI is even proposing that how we constitute it, we shouldn't leave it to only the party in power, but it should be a bipartisan approach where we are able to appoint people with diverse expertise through the Public Services Commission to actually be part of this fiscal council, and that the fiscal council should actually publish about a report of two times in a year, so that they're able to show what government is doing, the activities of government, whether they are in line with our fiscal targets. In fact, what we are also proposing is that that fiscal council should be given oversight on big-ticket public expenditure items, so that they are able to say that this big-ticket public expenditure item will affect the fiscal target that we set for ourselves. Over the last 10 years, our public finances has been characterized by deficit throughout. And so if you want to change course, then we must ensure that that oversight body we set is not just legally backed, but we give them power to bite. And that is what we don't see in the manifesto that was proposed. Is in terms of legal backing, what type of legal backing are you giving to that fiscal council? Then in terms of review, State Interest and Governance Accountability Act. So over the last 5 years, all the SOEs in Ghana have been making losses. Very, very deep-seated losses. In fact, in 2022, their losses was almost about 14 billion Ghana cedis. And now it is about 2.5 billion Ghana cedis, and it's returned to the losses we were making in 2021, which means that since 2019 till now, they've not been making any revenue. The NPP government is proposing that they want to use state-owned enterprises to create jobs and make them financially viable. How are they going to do that? They said they are going to review the SIGA Act. But if you look at the SIGA Act was not designed in a way that it provides check and balances for SOEs, because some of the SOEs are also set up independently by separate laws. The SIGA Act was actually designed to set up that State Interest and Governance Authority, the work they are going to do, their mandate, how they are going to find money to do their work. And so amending that work alone and not addressing the partisan interference in our SOEs, the lack of performance management and lack of accountability in our SOEs will not get them to be effective. And so what they are proposing is that amending the SIGA Act, what we are saying is that it's not enough, because if you look at the SIGA Act as it is now, it is not designed to strictly ensure profitability and manage these SOEs. So you can't rely on that. And so that promise, even if they amend the SIGA Act, our SOEs are not going to financially viable because, one, partisan interference, two, lack of performance management, and three is that most of these institutions, the way they are set up, are not competitive. And those are the things we think structurally you must address if you really want to move the needle. Another thing that they promise is also to pass the current local governance finance bill. This bill was taken, I think they took it to Parliament around 2018, 2019, but it's still not been passed. What that bill seeks to do is that it gives some of the MMDAs the power to actually borrow and invest in financially viable projects in their district. when IMANI did the social accountability report in 2019, what we found out was that in about 8 out of 10 of these districts that we engaged, none of them actually had the capacity to develop bankable projects. None of them have the capacity to develop bankable projects. And so accessing capital from either the domestic or international capital market means demonstrating bankability. And so the fact that this law will give them the power to borrow, and when they borrow too, it has to be sort of backed by government so that there's that guarantee that if the MMDA fails, government will pay. But what is important is building this MMDA's ability to, one, raise revenue and demonstrate bankability of those projects. And so by mere amending, or let's say passing the local government finance bill, will not address the challenges within these districts in terms of developing and implementing projects. But we need to look at how we enhance their revenue mobilization and how we help them develop bankable projects. Another thing that they also want to do is that they want to continue the gold purchase program to shore up our foreign reserve, which we see that other countries are also doing the same thing. And now what the Bank of Ghana does is that they buy about 20% of gold from the market. And now they want to look at sustainable small-scale mining, buy a lot of that gold, and ensure that they use it to shore up our foreign reserve. What we are saying is that if you look at this promise alone, this year we saw an increase in terms of production from small-scale mining. But in periods where small-scale mining output does not grow, how then do we get the Bank of Ghana? If this is going to be one of the anchor strategies for addressing our exchange rate issues, how then does the Bank of Ghana then get more gold to address that? Another challenge is that if we buy the gold from large-scale miners with cedi, because some of their capital expenditure is in dollar, they will still have to then convert the cedi to dollar. And so it's like what we paid in cedi, they have to reconvert some of them into dollar so that they can finance their operation. Those underlying dynamics must be worked out so well that we are able to control our exchange rate. But what we think is that since they started doing this, the exchange rate in terms of depreciation has actually dropped by just 3%. And that year on year, we see that it's, between last year and this year, it's been depreciating more than 20%. And so this program may not be effective because what will make this program effective is that gold prices must be so high so that you are able to buy a lot more, or you're able to shore up your foreign reserve, which we don't think it's possible within the short term if you look at the global gold market. Another thing that they also want to do is that they want to introduce a flat rate tax system, and they want to mimic the likes of Estonia. Now, while at IMANI, we believe that tax cut is important so that we liberate the enterprise abilities of businesses. In terms of this promise that the NPP is proposing, in terms of implementing a flat rate tax system across board, like the ones in Estonia, there are two main challenges. One is that in terms of tax policy implementation, sometimes you look at two things. One of them is that ease of implementation, transparency. Then another thing that you look at is the tax system progressive or regressive? Now, the flat tax system will make the tax collection, revenue mobilization in terms of tax collection very easy because its implementation is easy. So in terms of ease of implementation, good policy. In terms of transparency, flat tax systems are quite clear, and so you can really know how much you're supposed to pay. But when it comes to its progressivity, which means that the more you earn, the more you should pay. But in terms of a flat tax system, it doesn't offer progressivity. It's actually regressive. In fact, the Ministry of Finance and some development partners did an assessment of our existing taxes that we have, and they found out that apart from excise taxes that were regressive, all our tax handles are progressive, which means that the more you earn, the more you pay. And they found out that people who earn above about 240,000 Ghana cedis pay about 80 times the taxes of people who earn around 4,000 Ghana cedis. Which means that in Ghana, the more you earn, the more you pay. And so this flat tax system doesn't ensure that principle of progressivity. Another thing we also find is that in Estonia, in those countries, what you would see is that corporate taxes or corporate income taxes are actually levied on distributor profits. That is when the company is actually paying dividends. But if you look at our CIT is around 25%. But apart from CIT, you pay growth and sustainability levy, you pay VAT, NHIL. There are a whole lot of taxes that you pay that make ours very complex. And so it is not a straight line that once you have a flat tax, we can have the systems like the one in Estonia. But in those countries, it is very simplistic in the sense that their corporate taxes are actually charged on when you pay dividend. But here, you pay the corporate taxes in addition to other ones. Another challenge that you would also see in our system is that we have different sectors of economy that are very influential in our growth, like agric, mining, manufacturing. And in these sectors, there are different tax regimes within these sectors. And so trying to now run a homogeneous flat rate is very complex and does not take cognizance of these dynamics. And so that is one of the challenges that we also see with that. Another last one that we find as a challenge with the flat rate system when we want to implement it in Ghana is that the progressivity of a tax is to ensure that we address inequality, so that poor people do not tend to pay more than rich people. But this flat tax system is unable to achieve progressivity, and that is the challenge with the flat tax system that the NPP want to propose. When we do the fiscal recklessness analysis, what we find is that just reducing tax rate or cutting taxes does not guarantee increase in revenue mobilization. In 2017, about 7 tax handles were abolished. From 2017 to 2020, if you look at the revenue, there were always shortfalls because in Estonia, they have built very strong digitized infrastructure that makes revenue collection and enforcement very easy and possible. So they have more stronger enforcement abilities. But here, we have enforcement challenges. When we did the fiscal recklessness last week, tax irregularities alone were about 90% of the financial irregularities of MDAs between 2021 and 2023. And they were all because of weaknesses in compliance enforcement. And so it is your ability to enforce and create a system that make it easy for people to pay. That is why Estonia is successful. So when we talk about the flat rate tax, we shouldn't only talk about Estonia, but let's also look at the underlying reasons why Estonia is successful. And those are some of the factors that we find. And so while this may be good for businesses, there are challenges associated with this flat rate tax that the NPP is proposing. Now we'll go to the NDC. So the NDC says they want to scrap these taxes when they come into power. And what we find with that is that while, as I have already mentioned, tax cut is good, but in our current circumstances, you always have to gauge that against your revenue mobilization target and how that also affects your ability to meet your IMF conditionalities. What to Siga, their main revenue was from renting the place for events. And so we will not be able to achieve that. Then the NDC is proposing that they will partner private sector to build ultra-modern recreation villages. But we find a lot more of these recreation centers and theaters that have been abandoned. And so we think that the promise should actually be focused on revitalizing and also continue those projects. Then the Movement for Change wants to set up tourism desk e-visa program. And this e-visa program that the NPP is proposing, it was implemented in 2021. Then sports development. What we find is that under the NPP want to upgrade the service of our football pitches to meet international standard. In just about 3 years, we spent 86 million on Babayara, Esipon, and Accra Sports Stadium. And none of them was CAF approved until recently. And so these football pitches and AstroTurf have become a way of siphoning money that we have to pay attention to. And so this thing, we think that it is going to create a lot more cost. Another challenge is that they also want to build 6 new seater capacity stadia in the 6 regions. Currently, the Nkoko one has not been constructed. At the time, it was used for maize farming. That is also there. We have not been able to do that. The Doma Stadium was fully completed, commissioned, but until today, we've not done anything on that Doma Stadium. There are also the Zuma Nelson one that we are not using. And so if you build these 5,000 seater capacity in the new regions and utilization is low, they are all going to be sunk cost. Then the NDC also want to refurbish that. That is why we have to guard this particular sports sector. It is a way of investing in force infrastructure, but we don't see any returns. Then the energy sector, I'll be quick with this. The 2 main things facing the energy sector is that the SOEs are not financially viable, and 2, there's high energy sector cost. And so the promise of the parties should seek to address the energy sector challenge in terms of the financing. What the NPP wants to propose is that they want to roll out a 2,000 megawatt solar project. With this kind of promise, when we did our work with Climate Smart Enterprises, what we find is that if you want to construct a standard solar home system, solar panel for, let's say, a 3-bedroom house or a standard solar home system, it will cost you, if you're using the high-end technology like lithium batteries, it's going to cost you between the starting price around 70 to 80,000 Ghana cedis. And that is why when we did solar home system in 2015, the program didn't work well because people couldn't pay. And so at the moment, if you want to do a standard solar home system, it starts from 70,000 to 80,000. And how many people can afford that? But the government also wants to accelerate some of the solar parks that has been done by BUI and also VRE. But we think that this 2,000 megawatts, if they want to achieve that through solar home systems, then they should reduce the taxes on importation of solar panels and solar batteries and all of that. And they should make sure that the current approach where you have to import all of them together is removed. And that even if you import them as components, you're able to address that. Now, the NDC is also proposing to ensure or enforce the cash waterfall mechanism. This is needed because currently it is lack of leadership and discipline. That is why the cash waterfall mechanism is not working, because ECG is not complying with the cash waterfall mechanism. The Light Up Ghana project is feasible because we have the National Electrification Scheme levy and also the Public Lighting levy that can be used to finance that. And between 2016 and now, it has raised about 3.2 billion Ghana cedis. The Movement for Change said that they will eliminate doomsday and achieve sustained and reliable supply of power within 6 months. But the challenge with that is that there is a financing problem. Energy sector debt is growing. If you don't address that and address the under-recoveries, you can't solve it. The NPP promises to use the gold for oil to address the challenges within the downstream petroleum sector. This gold for oil program, it covers just 30% of the market demand. That 30% is not enough to actually bring down prices. When we did the analysis, we also found out that in order for this to be effective, then gold prices to be so higher so that you can be able to have more, access more oil and neutralize the price. Then between 2023 and now, we see some relative stability in the global prices of petroleum product. And so the decline in petroleum prices is not really because of the gold for oil program. It's because on the international market, prices have stabilized a bit, but the exchange rate is the problem, and also the taxes on petroleum product. The NDC also want to enhance exploration activities in the petroleum field, but more importantly, review the cylinder recirculation model. The new model seeks to close down the current LPG marketing companies and make them bottling companies. We think that it is going to restrict access, affect these local businesses. But the main reason why LPG is expensive is that LPG price on the global market has actually increased between 2022, 23, and now. It increased by about $200 on the global market. Then also taxes represent about 8% of the pump prices. And so if you want to bring it down, work on the exchange rate and also address the taxes. The movement for change also want to promote local content, quality, and also build an oil and gas processing hub, which this petroleum hub is being worked on in the Western region. Just in a few minutes, climate change and energy transition. What the NPP wants to do is that they want to support green businesses, but they don't say the specific incentive. But one of the things they mention is to give tax incentive on green technology product. But what was interesting in the NDC's manifesto is that they want to pass the National Climate Change Law, which is needed now. At the moment, all the institutions working on climate change are just governed by an MOU, so there's no accountability. And so in order to ensure that our NDCs are codified in law, we need a National Climate Change Law, and we think that that was very, very useful. Then on lands and natural resources, the NPP is proposing that they want to set up a mineral development bank to finance that, which we don't need, because most of these gold mining companies actually source their financing from international market, and domestically to these small-scale mining companies are able to find financing within our local banks. So setting up a separate one to actually raise money for small-scale mining is not needed. The NDC want to place a ban on galamsey, but one thing that they said is that they want to set up a Ghana Gold Board. And if you look at the mandate or the work that this Gold Board will do, it is similar to what the Minerals Commission does. So we don't need to create another layer of institution. Then under infrastructure, what we want, the picture we want to paint under this section is that this is how much we are investing in infrastructure. This is our infrastructure needs. And this is where we find money to do our infrastructure, which means that there's a huge gap between how much we need and how much we're actually spending. Averagely, we are spending, there's an infrastructure finance gap of about $2 billion in Ghana. If you look at since 2021, 22, 23, you see the share of foreign finance of infrastructure is coming down, and the domestic financing too is also not growing. There is also no financing also on the international market. And if you look at private sector participation in infrastructure, Ghana's performance has actually dipped so low that now, in terms of we attracting private sector finance into infrastructure, it is very low. Between 2013 till now, or 2010 till now, we have been able to get about 18 projects, according to what the World Bank tracked. 18 projects worth $7 billion. South Africa got 110 projects. And so it tells that in terms of our attractiveness in bringing in infrastructure projects, now it is very difficult for us to attract foreign finance. What the NPP is proposing under transportation is that they want to promote electric vehicle manufacturing locally. If you look at the battery electric vehicle import in Ghana, 96% of them are electric two-wheeler and three-wheeler. And so we think that in that area, we can build the assembling. But in terms of manufacturing, we have not built that value chain. What we can do at best is we have lithium, so we can participate in the lithium battery value chain, but now we don't have that. Then the 10 billion infrastructure push. I've already mentioned that there's no money to actually finance that. So in terms of raising 10 billion in 4 years to finance infrastructure, it's not realistic, and that we may not be able to achieve that. Then on housing, just the last one, then I'm done. On housing, all of them are proposing a social housing or affordable housing. Currently, the average cost of the cheapest home built by a developer or contractor is about $18,000. The average income of a public servant is $167 a month. And no public servant can actually afford that. And if you look at the mortgage rates, some of them are charging as high as 27%. Even the cheapest ones actually start from 16%. Now, the NPP wants to promote this National Rental Assistance Scheme. If you look at that National Rental Assistance Scheme, using their own calculator, if you want to hire a 2-bedroom, that costs about $1,500, and you are a public sector worker earning that $167, you don't qualify. You don't qualify for the National Rental Assistance Scheme because you won't be able to pay. And so you need to earn about 10,000 cedis before you can qualify for a 2-bedroom house, 2-bedroom apartment that costs 1,500 a month, using their own calculator. The NDC also want to promote affordable housing, but what makes housing affordable is that it is cheaper. People can spend less of their income to pay off the house, but at the moment, their incomes of public officers are low, or public servants are low, but the cost of housing is high because 90% of construction materials are imported, and exchange rate, taxes, and the inflation is what is affecting them. And that is why these housing policies may not be realistic. So thank you very much. I will call my colleague and Professor.
Wow. Thank you so much. Looking at the number of promises both political parties, in fact, all three political parties have made, if you needed to analyze them the way we are doing them, I'm sure you need a 24-hour economy, and then you need digital platforms. But thank you for putting all that in a very limited time. The next one we'll take will be from Profi Ajiman. He's looking at governance, education, and social services. Thereafter, we'll take our questions and share with them. Please put your hands together and let's welcome Mr. Ajiman. Thank you.
No, just okay, thanks, Caleb. I just want to have a discussion with you, and so that we can wrap up quickly because we are one for time. Now, when we looked at the governance, education, social services, right, it follows a bit of the trend that Dennis analyzed. There is issues with cost implications for some of the promises that were given, most of the promises that were given. There was no cost implications or any indication of how much those promises will cost, okay? Now, another thing, he mentioned vagueness. When you look at most of the governance, education, social services promises, it's completely vague. When you use words like reform, you use words like promote, you use words like enhance, it is quite different from using words like establish, okay? So those were the trends that we saw under that particular team. Another thing is the timeliness, lack of which we had, right? There was nothing that indicated in most of the promises that were given of the time element of their promises. Mind you, the political parties are here for 4 years, okay? So if you're here for 4 years and you have a bunch of a bunch of entrenched clauses in the Constitution that you want to tackle, we want to ask you, how many years is it going to take for you to do that, okay? So these are some of the questions. I'm glad we've moved on from that era of listening to political party songs and all that. I was asking my colleague what he thinks is the best political party song for this year. And there's none. There's none because people are beginning to think that we should reflect deeply into some of the promises that are given to us, okay? We need to ask certain important questions. Now, a common flow, when you look at the theme that we try to investigate, is the political parties want to promote efficiency, an efficient government. So, for example, if you've seen, the MPP says they want to cap number of ministers to 50, right? The NDC says to 60. And then I think the MDC wants to put it to 40. Now, one of the key issues that come to mind is there a political will to do it? Okay, because you have an electioneering campaigning season. You have a lot of people funding your political campaigns and all that. A lot of investments are put into your political campaigns. What happens is that you need to be able to pay them off. Party financing is still an issue in this country. Now, private people will be able to give you that much money, but they want something from it. And that's where all the rent-seeking and corruption starts from. So you have examples of that when you talk about the idea of having an efficient government. Then they also want to be able to pay MMDCEs, okay? And those are some of the trends that we see across the three political parties. Now, not only efficient government, but you see that there are a lot of constitutional review issues which are at hand or which are at play. Mind you, the constitutional review process we started in 2011, I'm not sure we've gone anywhere with that yet. And I don't know what the plans are. but the plans are contained in the manifestos. The next question would be, are the plans really feasible? Because if you have a party like Movement for Change, a Movement for Change wants to really bring some seismic changes to the Constitution. For example, having an upper house, a second chamber, okay, and removing the powers that the special prosecutor has and placing it in the hands of a corruption czar. You want to first question you want to ask yourself is, does the Movement for Change have the parties in the numbers in Parliament for it to be able to even go through with those changes? And they do not. Okay, I mean, IMANI doesn't think that it's not possible for the Movement of Change to come to power. But how feasible is that? Okay, and so these are what the parties are throwing at us. If we do not ask enough questions and get details from them, we're going to have this similar trend. Don't be confused by the numbers that you see. Okay, the NDC, I think, had most of the governance, education related promises under governance, the theme that we looked at. What that meant is that they had some sort of interest in certain things they wanted to do. Okay, beyond the Fisher Gap, beyond corruption and all that, they wanted to look at improving the welfare of teachers. They wanted to look at improving the welfare of health workers. They tilted towards, a bit of, all of them I guess did. People with disabilities, sorry, I need to get that right because we were corrected the other day. PWDs, right? And then there were some age-related, interventions they wanted to make. What we feel is that because the governance and social services bunch is some kind of a feel-good cluster of promises, political parties are much likely to throw a lot of the vague promises over there. So they'll do this for teachers. They'll do that for teachers, for health workers. They will give a 20% salary increment which I think is a laudable idea, to teachers who get deployed in rural areas. And then same for health workers as well. But the issue is that, does your interest in pursuing those interventions, does it make for any feasibility at all? Are you going to be able to implement it? And that's where the cost element also comes to play. Now you see that a lot of the issues, a lot of the promises they made had to do with corruption as well. We've been here in this country for quite some time. We have issues where members of the high members of the public, let's say high civil servants, have in their role tried to be anti-corruption crusaders, and then we all know what happens to them. It seems as though we have all the rules, all the clearly defined rules, but we are not able to implement. We are not able to implement it because the political parties themselves, if we'll be frank, gain from these rules that are not implemented. So, and then we saw that the trend of supporting the media and CSOs also came up, okay, which are very laudable ideas. If we could do that, fine. But the issue we had with support to the CSO is that if it's not project-based or something that is like very easy to hold people accountable on, then it becomes a trend which will inspire corruption itself, okay? We are all for supporting CSOs, but we need to support CSOs in a very visible and accountable manner, okay? But we go on to ask very, very important questions. Now, why did the political parties not provide so much detail? I mean, the idea of not providing so much detail is that if I don't provide so much detail to you in my campaign promise, then obviously after 4 years, I haven't told you when I'm going to implement that, right? So it becomes repetitive. And that is what we have to be called on to check we need to be able to insist that political parties have to provide enough details in their manifesto. You see very, very bulky manifestos. I think some probably paged up to 200 and 300. But when you look keenly at those promises, those are promises which have been repeated, or promises which are not really feasible. And that, for us, was of concern to us. And let me give you just a clear example. There's this move or interest to sort of implementing the Affirmative Action Act fully. What does this mean, implementing it fully? Now, when you look at certain sections of the Affirmative Action Act, it mandates the integration of women into sectors, particularly Section 3, and Section 17 and 18 require gender balance appointments in public roles. I mean, give us more details. How are you going to be able to do that? And the same act also talks about a phased approach to it, okay? Let's do 30% first, let's do 35%, and then let's do 50%. I mean, the people who occupy public service posts, how are you going to phase them out to bring in gender, all due respect, to bring in people who you think are qualified for that role? So there's not much detail to a lot of the promises that political parties make. Now, and I talked about the cost implication as well, just to quickly wrap up. There's a promise by the MPP to institute an electoral area share of the common fund. Okay, so this is inspired by the MP's share of the common fund, okay, where they give 5% from the DACF for the MPs to do a little bit of, they claim, rural and local, meet some local rural needs and all that. Now, have we considered what the cost element of it is? Having another 5% share of that same common fund being given to electoral area people. Okay, they are not legally bound spenders. Under what regulation are you going to do that? What is the sustainability when you start? Are you going to start like the Agenda 111 and say that we've completed 89% of it? Where 89% of it actually means that bits and pieces of the 89 have been completed. So they push it up to 89, sorry, not percent, but 54%. They push it up to 54 because in their own estimation, this is how much they've been able to do. So a lot more questions need to be asked for political parties to give us very, very good promises which are feasible. Else they may be wasting the time of the electorate. And what is of concern to us is that this kind of dialogue and discussion should not only remain at the level where of intellectual thinkers and people who are high up, with all due respect again, but they should be able to disseminate to the common person, in quotes, because they are the ones who vote massively for political parties. Otherwise, we are going to be hoodwinked all the time. Now, the timelines was also an issue, and that's the last thing I'll be talking about, just to wrap up. There's this promise from the NDC, who, by the way, I think have very, very good health-related promises. To be fair with you, it's very detailed and all that. But the next question you ask is, how are you going to sustain funding? Unless, of course, you bring in public-private partnership agreements and all that, you are not going to be able to sustain that. So the ex gratia is another example. No timelines given for when they say that when they come to power, they say when they win the 2024 elections, they are going to do it. Now, when you win the 2024 elections, right till the 2028 elections, that's all the time you have. But because you didn't give us a timeline, when are we expecting you? Because we've all been waiting for ex gratia to be scrapped. Whether it's a feeling of angst towards people getting more, we don't know. But these are some of the issues that we dealt with. So overall, just 2 points to make before I wrap up. Now, we've seen a lot of vague promises. We ask ourselves, what do we do with it? How do we go about it in the next cycle of elections? It behoves on civil society to begin to ask the needed questions for us to make that right change. And I know when Caleb says yes, that it means... Yes. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the Manifesto 2024. We are live on Channel 1 Television. My name is Caleb, and we are at Tank Palace Hotel. I'll bring back Dennis Asare to wrap up all that we've heard so far. So what's the major takeaway? We've heard a lot from energy, infrastructure, education, governance, economy, jobs, creation, all of that. So I'm sure one question that's big on your mind, you've heard that, okay, some of the political parties, most of them, their promises are vague. They don't give us the cost implications. We've heard a lot. So which of the parties has a clearer, more costed policy? How many want to know this? I mean, if you're thinking like I am, okay, so all that you have said, Dennis and your friend, Nekrakran is saying, whose policy is clearer? Whose policy is not as vague? Who gives us more costed policies that can help us take better decisions? You want to know this, right? All right, put your hands together. Let's welcome Dennis Asare, Senior Research Associate. He will wrap it all up for us before we go. Wonderful.
Great. Caleb is setting me up. He's setting me up for trouble, but I'll find a way to go around that trouble that he wants to give me. So I think that you have heard a lot of information today. But what we think from looking at the three manifestos is that none of them effectively addresses the structural problems to our macroeconomic challenges and public accountability. None of them really goes to the core. And what will happen is that there are a lot of things that they are saying. They are going to set up multiple schemes of stuff, but eventually, if you don't take care, by 4 years' time, we may be having another conversation, either about another IMF program or another support program, because we don't spend time to deal with the core problems. So we pretend to be implementing reforms, but we are not really dealing with reforms. Another point, too, is that most of the manifestos are overly ambitious, and if it gets through, it may place a lot of strain on our public expenditure. And that cuts across for the three political parties. And in terms of feasibility too, I think this is where Caleb wants to give me trouble. Sectorally, if you look at the NDC manifesto, you can see a lot of time being spent to expanding the issues and trying to find some sort of solutions for each particular theme or item that they want to deal with. And so I would say that in terms of detail and information, you see a lot more in the NDC manifesto. Likewise, if you look at the NPP manifesto too, you see a lot more of caution around in terms of the macro issues. And so you don't see specificity in terms of where they can get us to in terms of growth, in terms of trying to bring down exchange rate, inflation, and all of that, and as well as other key sectoral reforms that we want to see. And so you see the manifesto is trying to be a bit more cautious, but it had some very good, useful information or very good promises that seems to also try to address some key sectoral problem. But in terms of depth, you see a lot more information within the NDC one than the NPP. Another point too is that in terms of connecting the issues and also focusing on critical solutions, you see that more within the NPP manifesto than the NDC one. So, for example, if you pick on economy, you can see a lot more connection on exactly what they want to do in terms of controlling public expenditure, in terms of revenue mobilization, in terms of ensuring public accountability. You tend to see that connection. What you don't see in the NDC one around in terms of connection is that there are a lot of things, and sometimes it's hard to build connection. And that is the challenge with when you have so many promises that seems to do every little thing. So those are the key differences we see with the two manifestos. But I think the jury is out there. You saw the quantifiable and non-quantifiable one. That is our definition of vagueness. So we will project that slide whilst you socialize and have lunch. So as you step out, you look at who has more non-quantifiables, then you go and judge that they are the one that has the vague promises. Thank you very much for coming.
1 minute, Dennis, not so fast. There's a last one I want you to address in terms of the cost also. Did any of the political parties cost their policies for you in a comprehensive manner that voters can say, okay, depending on these, Dennis, which of the political parties costed their policies? I didn't get that part from your last closing. So let's get you on that before we go.
So in terms of cost, you see that you don't see that in any of the parties that specifically say that I am going to, this is going to cost this much, it's going to cost that much. The only thing that you see in the NPP one is that we are cutting expenditure by 3%. That one, they are very specific, and they are going to take out 30 billion. The NDC2 said my infrastructure is going to cost 10 billion. So you see both sides, at least on one score, they are able to tell that. But in terms of sector by sector and theme by theme, they didn't cost their manifestos. So as at now, if you ask them, you say we are going to address or bring together all the VAT items under one common VAT rate, what will be the VAT rate? None of the parties can tell you. If say they want to bring in tax incentives, none of parties can tell you specific incentive because they didn't cost it.
That's a very good one. Thank you so much, Dennis. We have a few minutes. I'd like to invite your questions, and we can wrap up on that. So maybe 3, 1, 2, and then 3. So I'll start with you. Please come forward. You grab the microphone. Tell us your name and shoot your question, please. One question each for lack of time. Okay. Thank you, Ma'am.
My name is Ruby Ofori. I'm a journalist.
Ruby Ofori, let's hear you.
And my question is, it seems as if all these manifestos are set up to develop what Bright Simmons calls state enchantment.
Right.
Promises, beautiful, bright promises that we all know will never be achieved. And we'll end up in 2028 in a worse economic situation than we are today. We all know that. 30 million people. So what is the answer then? As we head to elections in a month's time, knowing that whichever party is elected will come and implement policies that will not work, what is the answer? For civil society groups, especially like IMANI and the others, and the unions, all these institutions that have extra democratic institutional power.
Right. Thank you, Ruby. Yes, please. Let's hear you. Microphone to my boss. Oh, sorry. Yes. Thank you, sir. Let's hear your name and let's get your question quick.
Yeah, my name is Richmond Okru. I'm from Techniques in Management Transfer. This is a suggestion. I would be happy if all these things were linked to our 40 years development plan so that we could be able to measure. We could be able to measure which of the sectors that we want to improve.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's like there's no limit. I mean, you cannot measure. So if this one is linked to our 40 years development plan, then as a nation, we know that, oh, when we do this, it can get us somewhere. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Richmond. Because yours is a suggestion, I'll take an extra question. There are 2 at the back. So let's hear your names and then your questions rather quickly.
My name is Andrew Asare.
Okay.
I wanted to, Dennis mentioned that exchange effects on manufacturing and that we need to be competitive in that space. And I want to just expand on that because from what we know, the lower your currency to the US dollar, it makes manufacturing a bit more competitive in your country, right? So
you want some detail on the foreign exchange and its impact on the manufacturing sector. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Mohammed Ibn Hassan from Center for Youth and Child Crisis Intervention. Actually, my question links with the gentleman who talks about the 40-year development plan. But he made me confused whether we still have 40-year development plan.
Yeah, I thought we'd gone beyond that.
Yeah, so whichever development plan that we have as a nation, my question is, do the political parties draw their manifesto having in mind that we have development plan for the nation? Because a lot of the promises that they bring up they bring around. Sometimes when you go into the development, the national development plan,
are already captured in the development plan?
Yes.
Okay.
But when they come, they fail to implement it. So now, who will be on their neck to make sure that that thing is done, because it is already captured in the development plan? That's the question I have.
Thank you, Mohammed. The media and the civil society are doing that. I'll invite Dennis to respond to. Oh, I'm sorry, we've exhausted our time. So we just have time for 3 questions now. Ruby is saying, look, there's a state of enchantment, lots of promises. We all know that if most of them are, implemented, we will be in fiscal distress. Question about foreign exchange, its impact on the manufacturing sector. Mohammed gave us a brilliant suggestion. Same did Richmond. So we have 2 questions technically. All right.
Thank you, Ruby. So I'm glad you brought up a state enchantment. It's like, but I don't know, they will be jujufied about what the government is going to do, and eventually we wouldn't see anything, but the devil is in the detail. So that is why I think as IMANI, day in and day out, we constantly look at what government is doing to critically analyze what the government is actually going to implement, raise advocacy, and hope that citizens will join us in keeping our governments in check. And so, because we have a history of promising more than we can actually do, that is why we need stronger civil society, stronger accountability actors who also, especially citizens. Politicians are afraid more of citizens than civil society. So when citizens are empowered, then they can help us keep politicians in check. Then on the 40-year development plan, since Gagisberg time, we've never committed to any development plan. And so if you look at the parties' manifestos, they are never in line with any of the development plan, because they will have to prepare a coordinated program. And the coordinated program is just the manifesto converted. And that is why it's hard for you to pin them to a development plan. Then on the exchange rate, I think one of the things that we say is that if your exchange rate is stable, at least your market is predictable. Businesses can forecast the cost of operation at least beyond 2 quarters. Now, businesses can't even forecast beyond a month because of fluctuations. That's why we say that create a competitive exchange rate market where it is predictable. We can't say that it should be as low as this before it is competitive. But if it is stable and predictable, then it helps business plan very well. So thank you very much for your questions. We are grateful.
Wonderful. Excellent. So, thank you, Dennis Asari and Amprofi Ajiman. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for yourselves. It's been a great day, and thank you for being a part of this. This has been a Manifesto 2024 brought to you with the kind support of the British High Commission. We appreciate your support. Thank you all, our friends from the media who are live on Channel 1 television from Tang Palace. My name is Caleb Kuda. Until next time, we're voting in a couple of weeks, right? Okay, so all the best to all of us. May the best win. I'll see you again. God bless you.